Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a concept that's, well, it's intriguing and it's everywhere. The free rider problem.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a philosophical brain teaser with implications that reach well beyond the classroom.
Yeah, you're right. It really touches on everything from economics and politics to even, our everyday moral choices. We're going to be drawing a lot from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for this deep dive, which is a really great source of, reliable, peer-reviewed information on, well, basically everything in philosophy.
Just imagine a scenario where everyone benefits if everyone just chips in a little.
Yeah.
Less pollution,
Yeah.
better public services, stronger social movements, like all the things.
So it's pretty good in theory, right?
Yeah.
But there's a catch. It's often individually rational to just skip doing your part and just enjoy the benefits from everyone else's efforts.
Yeah.
And that is like the essence of the free rider problem.
It's so tempting, though, to think like, my little contribution won't make any difference anyway, but like, what if everyone thinks that way?
Exactly. The system just breaks down. The collective good, the thing that benefits everyone, it just fails to materialize. The Stanford Encyclopedia uses some, relatable examples to illustrate this. So let's start with something like pollution. We all benefit from cleaner air and cleaner water.
Totally. But, it's easy to think, well, my car alone isn't going to, significantly impact air quality, so why bother with emissions controls? Or, what difference does it really make if I don't recycle just this one plastic bottle?
And that's the danger of the free rider problem. If enough people think that, the cumulative effect can be pretty disastrous.
It's kind of like with public radio, right? You might like listening, but have you ever, actually donated during a pledge drive?
It's a classic example of what economists call a collective good. These goods have two key characteristics: jointness of supply and non-excludability.
Okay, break those down for me. What do those actually mean?
Okay, so jointness of supply means that one person using the good doesn't stop anyone else from enjoying it at the same time. So we can both listen to public radio at the same time without, messing up each other's experience.
Right, that makes sense. What about non-excludability?
So non-excludability means it's hard or sometimes impossible to keep people from benefiting from the good, even if they haven't, contributed to making it or maintaining it. It's hard to stop someone from listening to public radio just because they haven't donated.
Which is why they have those pledge drives. They're
Yeah.
relying on the goodwill of the listeners to, keep the programming going.
Exactly. Think about all the things you enjoy that kind of fit that description. Public parks, street festivals, national defense. These are all collective goods that rely on some level of, cooperation and contribution.
So have you ever gone to a public park or a street festival?
If you have, you've been part of a collective action scenario, whether you realize it or not. You're enjoying benefits that wouldn't even be there without, the contributions, financial or otherwise, of so many people.
All around us. Now, to really get into the mechanics of the free rider problem, we need to talk about the prisoner's dilemma.
Yes. The prisoner's dilemma. It's this classic model from game theory that I think perfectly shows the challenges of collective action. It's like, imagine two people who got arrested for a crime and they're put in separate cells. They can't talk.
Oh, okay. So far, so good. It sounds kind of like a movie.
It's a scenario that's been used to explain all sorts of, complex social dynamics. So each prisoner has a choice. They can either confess to the crime and betray their partner, or they can stay silent and hope their partner stays silent too.
It's a high-stakes game of trust.
Exactly. If both of them stay silent, they each get a relatively light sentence. If one confesses and the other one stays silent, the confessor goes free and the silent one gets a heavy sentence. And if they both confess, they both get a moderate sentence.
So what's the catch?
So from a purely individual, self-interested perspective, confessing is always the better strategy. It doesn't matter what the other prisoner does.
Wait, why is that?
Okay, let's think about it. If the other prisoner stays silent, confessing gets you free, which is way better than that light sentence you'd get for staying silent. And if the other prisoner confesses, confessing gets you that moderate sentence, which is still better than the heavy sentence you would have gotten for staying silent. So it doesn't matter what the other prisoner does, confessing seems like the smarter move.
But that's so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they both be better off if they both stayed silent?
You're totally right. That's the paradox. Individual rationality leads to a not-so-great outcome for the group as a whole. If they both confess, they actually end up with a worse outcome than if they had both cooperated and stayed silent.
They're trapped by their own self-interest.
Exactly.
Right.
And this logic, it scales up. Imagine not two prisoners, but a whole society facing similar choices about cooperating or just acting in their own narrow self-interest.
That's kind of scary. It makes you wonder if humans are even capable of cooperating on a large scale. The Stanford Encyclopedia mentions that even way back, like historical figures like Plato, Adam Smith, and David Hume, they all struggled with this type of dilemma long before, modern game theory came along.
Yeah, it's a timeless problem. So, like, Plato in his Republic explores that tension between what individuals want and the laws that hold a society together.
And Adam Smith, even though he believed in the, invisible hand of the market, he still said that self-interest, if it's not kept in check, can really mess up the common good.
They knew that what's good for the individual isn't always good for the group, and vice versa. And this brings us to a really important person in how we think about collective action. Mancur Olson. His book, The Logic of Collective Action, really changed things.
Okay, let's talk about Olson. What was so groundbreaking about his work?
Well, before Olson, a lot of people just assumed that groups would naturally do what was in their best interest, as a collective. But Olson argued that this isn't always true. He really challenged the conventional wisdom and kind of exposed these often hidden things that make collective action so hard. Olson pointed out that even when it's like in a group's best interest to, act collectively, individual incentives often work against that.
So it's kind of like this tug of war between individual self-interest and the collective good.
Yeah, exactly. The Stanford Encyclopedia uses this example of labor unions to kind of illustrate this point. So it's collectively beneficial for workers to band together and bargain for, better wages and working conditions.
Let the other workers pay dues and fight for those better wages. I'll just, enjoy the benefits if they succeed.
Exactly. And Olson said that this dynamic applies to all kinds of groups, not just unions. It's there in environmental groups, political parties, even social movements.
So if Olson is right, are we just doomed to a world of free riding and collective failure? Is cooperation just like a fantasy?
Not necessarily. Thankfully, things aren't that bleak. Collective action does happen, and Olson himself gave some reasons for why.
Okay, good. I was starting to get a little worried there.
Yeah.
So how do we escape this free rider trap? If self-interest is so powerful, how do groups ever manage to get anything done?
One way is through what Olson called the byproduct theory. People are more likely to contribute to a group if they get something extra in return, something beyond just the collective good itself.
So it's like a little sweetener to get people to participate, a little something extra to tip the scales towards cooperation.
Exactly. The encyclopedia uses the example of the Sierra Club. So people might join not just because they care about, environmental protection, which is the collective good, but also because they get things like hike trips or discounts on outdoor gear, or just a sense of community with people who think the same way. Those are the byproducts.
Oh, so those perks make it a better deal. It makes it more rational for an individual to join and contribute. It's like those early labor unions that gave their members like affordable insurance plans or other benefits that were hard to get anywhere else.
Exactly. Those byproducts can make contributing to the collective good feel less like a sacrifice and more like, you're actually getting a good deal.
That's pretty smart. But what about groups that don't offer those kinds of like tangible perks? How do they motivate people?
That's where leadership comes in, what Olson called political entrepreneurs. These are people who are really good at organizing, motivating, and inspiring people to take action. They often have a compelling vision, good communication skills, and they can mobilize resources.
So they're like those charismatic leaders that rally people around a cause. They provide the spark that gets collective action going.
Yeah, think of figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, or even someone like Greta Thunberg in the climate change movement. These people were able to inspire others to take action, even when it meant personal risks or costs.
So their leadership helped to overcome the free rider problem by like appealing to something beyond just self-interest.
Right. They tapped into people's values, their sense of justice, their belief in a better future.
And of course, we can't forget about the role of government in all of this.
Absolutely. The state, with its power to tax and regulate, can help fix free rider problems that would be really hard or maybe even impossible to solve through voluntary action alone. Think about national defense.
That's a great example. National defense is like the ultimate public good. Everyone benefits from a nation's security, and it's basically impossible to exclude anyone from those benefits. It would be so hard and probably pretty chaotic to try to fund a military just through donations.
Exactly. The government can step in, require everyone to contribute through taxes, and make sure that this really important collective good is provided. They can also use regulations to address things like pollution by setting limits on emissions or enforcing environmental standards.
So the government can be like a referee, making sure people aren't taking advantage of the system and everyone's doing their fair share. It's really interesting how this like abstract problem plays out in such concrete ways. But the Stanford Encyclopedia also kind of wants us to think beyond just those self-interested motivations. Are people really only driven by what benefits them personally?
That's the question that philosophers have been debating forever. We see tons of examples of people acting altruistically, like supporting causes that don't directly benefit them. Think about people who volunteer their time and money to charities, fight for social justice, or work to protect the environment.
It's true. People donate to causes, help strangers, even risk their lives for others. If self-interest was the only thing driving us, wouldn't society look a lot different?
It definitely raises questions about whether self-interest can really explain everything about human behavior. Are there other things at play, like a sense of duty, a desire for fairness, or just plain compassion for others? This brings up a whole philosophical discussion about what motivates humans, their role of morality, and that tension between individual and collective interests.
It's a deep dive within a deep dive.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another interesting application of the free rider problem voting.
Yes. The classic example of why bother. If we just follow the logic of pure self-interest voting can seem totally irrational. In a big election, your one vote is probably not going to change the outcome. So why go through all the trouble?
Especially if it means waiting in long lines or missing work or going out in bad weather.
Exactly. But millions of people vote even though it seems irrational. It's what's called the paradox of voting.
So what are some of the explanations for why people vote if it's not just about self-interest?
Well, there are a few possibilities. Some people might vote out of habit or just because they feel like it's their duty as a citizen. Others might feel pressured by society to vote or worried about what people will think if they don't. Some might actually believe, even though it's unlikely that their one vote will make a difference.
It makes you wonder what the will of the people really means if people are voting for all sorts of different reasons and not just based on what they think is best for them personally.
It definitely makes our understanding of democracy a lot more complicated.
Mhm.
Are people voting based on what they know about policies, or are they driven by things that aren't so rational?
Yeah.
How do we even interpret the results of an election if people are voting for so many different reasons?
It's a real puzzle, and I bet it keeps political scientists up at night. All right, let's switch gears a bit and tackle a question that's both ethical and philosophical. Is free riding always wrong? Or are there times when it's okay morally or even necessary?
That's a great question. This gets to the heart of the moral implications of the free rider problem. The Stanford Encyclopedia explores some really interesting ideas here, especially the concepts of fairness and mutuality of restrictions.
So it's not just about whether it's smart to free ride, but whether it's morally right.
Exactly. Philosophers like H.L.A. Hart and John Rawls have really thought hard about this question. Hart, for example, argued that when people are working together in something, those who benefit from everyone else's efforts have a responsibility to give back.
It's like this unspoken agreement. If you're enjoying the results of a group effort, you have to do your fair share.
Right. And Rawls added the idea of voluntary acceptance. He said this obligation to be fair is even stronger when you've chosen to benefit from a cooperative system. You can't really justify free riding if you're actively choosing to be part of a system where everyone needs to contribute.
That makes sense. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't enjoy the benefits without helping to keep it going.
Whoa.
But the encyclopedia also says that things aren't always so clear-cut.
Let's think about some everyday examples. Imagine everyone in a house agrees to share chores equally. Sounds fair, right?
Definitely. Everyone contributes, and everyone gets to live in a clean and organized space.
But what if one person just never does their chores? What if they leave their dishes piled up their clothes all over the place and just don't do what they're supposed to do? Everyone else has to pick up the slack, basically doing their work for them.
It just seems unfair.
Yeah.
They're getting the benefits of a clean home without doing any of the work. It's like free riding on a smaller scale.
Exactly. Or think about a neighborhood watch program where only a few people actually participate. They're spending their time, energy, and maybe even putting themselves at risk to keep the whole neighborhood safe.
While everyone else is just free riding, enjoying the peace of mind without doing anything themselves.
And it can be the same with paying taxes. Taxes pay for public services that benefit everyone, like schools, roads, healthcare, social safety nets. If someone doesn't pay their taxes, they're free riding on everyone else. They're using these public services without contributing their fair share.
It all comes back to fairness and giving back. We benefit from living in a society where people generally cooperate, contribute to the common good, and follow the rules. But the free rider problem shows that tension between what individuals want and what's good for the group.
And it brings up some tough moral questions. When is it okay to benefit without contributing? And when does free riding go from being a smart but selfish choice to something that's just plain wrong?
It really makes you think, It's not always easy to know the right thing to do, especially when you consider things like individual situations, different abilities, and different ethical ideas. It seems like we keep coming back to this question. Where is the line between free riding that's okay and free riding that's not?
It's a question that's bothered philosophers for a long time. Is it ever all right to take advantage of a system even if you think you have a good reason? What about people who just can't contribute, even if they want to?
That's a good point. What about somebody who's going through something really hard, like a serious illness, or they're struggling financially? Can we really expect them to contribute the same way as someone who's doing well?
That's where it gets tricky. The idea of fairness itself gets more complicated. Are we talking about everyone ending up with the same thing or everyone putting in the same amount of effort?
And how do you even measure effort in a way that takes into account everyone's individual situations and challenges? It's a tough one for sure.
Hmm.
But after all this time talking about the free rider problem, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they go about their lives?
I think the biggest thing is just awareness. Once you understand this thing, you know how what's good for one person can often go against what's good for everyone. You start seeing it everywhere.
It's like you've got this new way of looking at the world.
Exactly. You start to notice all the little ways and the big ways that free riding happens, but you also start to really appreciate the people who are contributing, who are trying to make things better for everyone.
You start to notice the people who are always doing the dishes, showing up for neighborhood meetings, volunteering their time, or just being mindful of how they're using shared resources.
Right, and maybe this awareness makes you think about yourself. You might start asking, am I doing my part? Am I taking advantage of things? How can I be part of the solution instead of part of the problem?
That's a really powerful question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
It's like a call to action, reminding us that we're all connected and that what we do affects other people.
And maybe, just maybe, understanding the free rider problem better can help us create systems from government policies to social rules that encourage people to cooperate, be fair, and make things better for everyone.
And that's a positive thought.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even though we've been talking about a problem, it's not about being cynical or giving up. It's about using knowledge to make things better.
You got it. Awareness is the first step. Then comes the challenge of figuring out solutions.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today. But before we wrap up, I have one last question for you. We know that free riding is just part of being human. So how can we design systems that encourage people to contribute to be part of the solution? What are some things we can do?
That's the big question. And it's one that deserves its own deep dive. But I think it starts with a few basic ideas.
Okay, tell me, what are the foundations of a society where people cooperate more?
First, we need to understand and use incentives. People respond to rewards and punishments, so we need to design systems that make cooperation more appealing and free riding less appealing. This could be things like tax breaks for donating to charity, giving perks to people who always participate in community stuff, or even just giving praise and recognition to people who go above and beyond.
So it's about making cooperation feel good, both like on the inside and with actual reward.
Exactly. But it's not just about giving rewards. Sometimes you need consequences, too. We might need stricter rules for people who are obviously free riding, like fines for not paying taxes or making sure rules and regulations are enforced.
It's about finding that balance between encouraging good behavior and discouraging bad behavior.
Right. But besides those more concrete rewards and punishments, we also need to appeal to something deeper, something more human. We need to tap into people's sense of fairness, their desire to be part of something bigger than themselves, their natural ability to feel empathy and compassion.
So it's about nurturing those things that make us want to help others to make the world a better place.
Exactly. This could mean promoting ethical education, building a sense of community and shared responsibility, showing inspiring stories of people cooperating and being selfless, and even just encouraging people to talk openly and thoughtfully about the problems we face as a society.
It sounds like we need a bunch of different approaches.
Yeah.
A mix of smart policies, strong social norms, and a real commitment to building a culture of cooperation.
It's a complicated challenge, but I think we can do it. Humans are really good at adapting and being creative. If we can use those strengths, we can definitely create systems that push us towards a more cooperative, fair, and sustainable future.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the free rider problem. It's been a really interesting journey, and I hope our listeners have come away with more curiosity and a better understanding of this complex and widespread social thing.
It's been great. I always enjoy exploring these tough ideas with you.
And to our listeners, remember, knowledge is power, and critical thinking is so important. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds working. Until next time, happy diving.